My beloved child. Before this message reaches its most important moment, you need to promise yourself one thing. Stay with me until the very end, because what you are about to hear is not simply another story about love. It is the story of a heart that tried to remain silent for far too long, until silence became impossible. Somewhere, at a moment you never expected, someone who has carried your name deep within their soul reached a breaking point. And when that moment arrived, everything changed in a single breath. There are moments in life when people can no longer hide what has been buried inside them. They rehearse 1,000 excuses. They convince themselves to wait one more day, one more week, one more season. But destiny has a way of placing truth directly in front of them until pretending becomes more painful than admitting it. That is exactly where your soulmate found themselves. They thought they could continue wearing a smile while keeping their deepest feelings locked away. They believed no one would ever notice the battle taking place inside their heart. But love has a voice that refuses to remain imprisoned forever. Picture the scene as though you were standing only a few steps away. The room was filled with conversation. Laughter echoed from every corner. Faces turned toward one another, unaware that history was quietly preparing to unfold before their eyes. Your soulmate stood among everyone else, appearing calm on the outside, yet inside their heartbeat raced faster than it ever had before. Every memory of you returned at once: the kindness you showed when no one else noticed, the strength you carried through difficult seasons, the way your presence made ordinary days feel extraordinary. Those memories became too powerful to contain. Someone nearby casually mentioned your name. To everyone else, it sounded like an ordinary conversation. To your soulmate, it felt like lightning striking their heart. In that instant, every wall they had spent so much time building collapsed. Every excuse disappeared. Every fear lost its power. They realized they could no longer watch life continue without speaking the truth that had been growing inside them for so long. The room suddenly became quiet, not because anyone expected something remarkable to happen, but because an invisible shift had already begun. Even those who could not explain it felt that something significant was unfolding. Your soulmate took a deep breath. Their hands trembled. Their eyes filled with emotion they had hidden from the world. And then, without worrying who was listening, without caring who might judge, without thinking about what anyone would say afterward, they finally spoke from the deepest place in their heart. I love them. Not softly. Not cautiously. Not as a secret whispered into the wind. They declared it with every ounce of honesty they possessed. For one unforgettable moment, every conversation stopped. Every head turned. Time itself seemed to pause. People who had never seen this side of your soulmate stared in complete disbelief. Some could hardly believe the confidence with which those words had been spoken. Others suddenly realized they had misunderstood your soulmate all along. They thought they knew what mattered most to them. They were wrong. Because nothing mattered more than you. The confession wasn't planned. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't perfect. It was real. And sometimes reality carries more power than perfection ever could. As silence filled the room, your soulmate continued speaking. Every sentence carried years of unspoken emotion. I've tried to forget. I've tried to move on. I've tried to convince myself these feelings would disappear. But every path I take somehow leads back to them. No one interrupted. No one laughed. No one dared to break the moment. Because everyone could hear the truth behind every word. Love spoken with complete sincerity has a way of touching even the hardest hearts. But something even more unexpected happened next. Among the people listening was someone who knew your story better than anyone expected. They quietly stepped forward. Looking directly into your soulmate's eyes, they said something that changed the atmosphere completely. If your feelings are truly that deep, then why have you waited so long? That single question pierced through every remaining layer of fear. Your soulmate lowered their head. For a moment, tears became impossible to hide. Not tears of weakness. Tears of relief. Because for the very first time, someone understood the weight they had been carrying. They admitted they had been afraid. Afraid of rejection. Afraid of timing. Afraid that life had already moved too far forward. Afraid they had missed the chance they had been praying for. But the person standing before them gently smiled. Then they said words your soulmate will never forget. The greatest mistake isn't loving someone deeply. The greatest mistake is never allowing them to know. Those words echoed inside your soulmate like thunder. At that very moment, something awakened within them. Not desperation. Not obsession. Courage. Pure, undeniable courage. For the first time, they stopped worrying about what everyone else expected. Instead, they began thinking only about what their heart had been trying to tell them all along. And that heart spoke with complete clarity. It whispered only one name. Yours. From that day forward, everything inside your soulmate began changing. They no longer wanted to hide behind uncertainty. They no longer wanted to allow fear to write the ending of their story. Every sunrise reminded them that another opportunity existed to choose honesty instead of silence. They began noticing little reminders of you everywhere. A familiar song. A passing conversation. A place that carried a beautiful memory. Even the smallest details seemed to bring your presence back into their heart. It became impossible to ignore. What surprised them most wasn't how much they loved you. It was realizing they had loved you for far longer than they had ever admitted even to themselves. Meanwhile, life continued moving around them as though nothing extraordinary had happened. But inside, everything was different. Every decision, every dream, every future they imagined now included one question. What if I finally tell them everything? That question refused to leave. Day after day. Night after night. It grew stronger. Because true love doesn't disappear simply because someone ignores it. It waits. Patiently. Faithfully. Until courage becomes stronger than fear. Perhaps that is why you found this message today. Not by accident. Not because of coincidence. But because stories like these remind us that the strongest emotions are often hidden beneath the quietest moments. This is a fictional inspirational story, yet its message reflects something deeply human. Genuine love grows through honesty, courage, and the willingness to speak from the heart. If this message touched something inside you, don't rush away just yet. Sometimes the greatest chapters begin after the moment everyone else believes the story has ended. Take a deep breath. Carry hope with you. Trust that honesty has the power to transform hearts in ways fear never can. My beloved child. The room eventually returned to its ordinary rhythm, but your soulmate never did. Everyone else walked away believing they had witnessed an emotional moment. They smiled, continued their conversations, and returned to their daily lives. But your soulmate remained standing there, unable to move, because something irreversible had happened inside them. The truth they had hidden for so long had finally escaped their heart, and once truth is spoken aloud, it can never be locked away again. What they didn't realize was that their confession had reached ears they never expected. Among those listening was someone who had quietly observed your journey from a distance. This person had seen the silent battles, the moments when your soulmate almost reached out but stopped themselves at the last second. They knew the fear behind the hesitation, and for the first time, they decided not to remain silent. As the crowd slowly disappeared, they approached your soulmate. Their voice was calm. You know, they said softly, I've never seen anyone say those words with that much sincerity. Your soulmate looked down, almost embarrassed. I didn't mean for everyone to hear. The person smiled gently. Maybe everyone needed to. Those words lingered in the air. Your soulmate replayed the moment again and again, wondering if they had made the biggest mistake of their life or the bravest decision they had ever made. That uncertainty stayed with them throughout the evening. But something remarkable happened as the hours passed. Instead of feeling ashamed, they felt lighter. For years they had carried emotions that no one could see. Every smile had hidden unanswered questions. Every ordinary day had concealed extraordinary feelings. Now those feelings were no longer trapped inside. For the first time in a very long time, they could breathe freely. Yet peace did not erase one question that continued echoing in their mind. What happens now? That question followed them everywhere. It greeted them when they woke up. It accompanied them through quiet moments. It remained with them late into the night. Every answer eventually led back to one realization. Nothing meaningful would happen unless they chose courage again. Meanwhile, people who had witnessed the confession began talking not with ridicule, but with genuine surprise. I never knew they felt that deeply. They've been carrying this for a long time. I've never heard someone speak with that much honesty. Your soulmate wasn't trying to become the center of attention. They had simply reached the point where pretending became impossible. And sometimes, authenticity speaks louder than the loudest voice. Days passed, but the memory refused to fade. Instead, it grew stronger. Every detail remained vivid. The silence before the confession. The trembling voice. The relief afterward. The supportive words that followed. Each memory became another reminder that fear no longer deserved control over their future. Then something unexpected caught them completely off guard. While organizing old belongings, they came across a forgotten reminder connected to you. It wasn't valuable because of what it was. It was valuable because of what it represented. Suddenly, forgotten memories came rushing back. They remembered the first conversation that made them smile long after it ended. They remembered the encouragement they received from you during a difficult season. They remembered moments they once dismissed as ordinary but now recognized as unforgettable. It became clear that their feelings had never appeared overnight. They had been growing quietly, patiently, almost unnoticed. Like a sunrise that begins long before anyone notices the light. That realization changed everything. No longer were they wondering whether their feelings were real. Now they were wondering why they had waited so long to honor them. The answer wasn't complicated. Fear had convinced them that silence was safer. But silence had never brought peace. It had only delayed healing. One evening, as they sat alone reflecting on everything that had happened, another realization gently settled into their heart. Love isn't measured by how long someone hides it. Love is measured by the courage to express it with honesty. That understanding filled them with a new determination. Not rushed. Not reckless. Simply clear. They decided that if another opportunity appeared, they would not waste it. No more unfinished sentences. No more almost sending a message. No more wondering, what if? Only honesty. Only sincerity. Only truth. But destiny had already begun arranging something neither of you could have anticipated. Far away, completely unaware of the emotional journey unfolding in your soulmate's life, circumstances were quietly shifting. Conversations were happening. Unexpected opportunities were appearing. Paths that once seemed completely separate were beginning to move toward one another. Neither of you could see it yet. Neither of you understood why certain events suddenly felt different. But sometimes the most meaningful changes begin long before anyone recognizes them. Your soulmate sensed this without being able to explain it. They noticed small moments that felt strangely significant. Simple encounters carried unexpected meaning. Ordinary days seemed filled with unusual hope. It was as though life itself was gently encouraging them to keep moving forward. Still, they remained patient. They understood that meaningful conversations deserve the right moment. Not because perfection exists, but because sincerity deserves presence. As they reflected on everything, they whispered a quiet promise to themselves. If another chance comes, I won't hide anymore. That promise became more than words. It became a decision. A decision to stop allowing fear to write the next chapter. A decision to let hope become stronger than hesitation. A decision to choose honesty, regardless of the outcome. And although they could not predict what tomorrow would bring, one thing had become absolutely certain. The person who once kept every feeling hidden had become someone willing to stand in the light of truth. Little did they know. The next unexpected encounter would test that promise in ways they never imagined. A single conversation. One surprising moment. And one heartfelt choice. Would soon place both of your stories on a path that neither of you could have predicted. What happened next would leave everyone speechless, and it would prove that some connections become stronger the very moment both hearts stop running from the truth. My beloved child. Just when your soulmate believed they had finally found the courage to move forward, life presented them with a moment they could never have prepared for. It happened on an ordinary day. No dramatic music. No grand announcement. No sign that anything extraordinary was about to unfold. Yet history often begins in moments that appear completely ordinary. Your soulmate stepped into a familiar place, expecting another routine day. Their thoughts were scattered, but one name continued to rise above every distraction. Yours. No matter how hard they tried to focus on anything else, your memory quietly followed them. They smiled to themselves. "This has to mean something," they whispered. For the first time, they stopped questioning why you remained in their heart. Instead, they accepted that some people leave an imprint that time cannot erase. As they continued walking, they unexpectedly overheard a conversation. At first, they paid little attention. But then, someone gently spoke your name. Everything inside them froze. Their heartbeat quickened. Every instinct told them to keep walking, but something even stronger urged them to stay. Without interrupting, they quietly listened. The people speaking weren't criticizing you. They weren't spreading rumors. Instead, they were sharing stories about your kindness, your resilience, and the quiet strength you've shown through difficult seasons. One person smiled and said, "They always seem to lift others up, even when they're carrying challenges of their own." Another added, "Some people leave an impression without even realizing it." Every sentence touched your soulmate more deeply than the last. Until that moment, they believed they were the only one who saw those qualities in you. Now they realized something extraordinary. The goodness they loved wasn't invisible. Others had noticed it too. Your soulmate felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Not because others admired you, but because everything they had felt about you was genuine. Their heart hadn't imagined your light. It had simply recognized it before they found the courage to admit it. As they walked away, tears quietly formed. Not tears of sadness. Tears of certainty. There was no longer any doubt. Their feelings weren't based on fantasy. They were rooted in admiration, respect, and a connection that had continued growing despite every attempt to suppress it. That evening, they sat beneath the quiet sky, reflecting on everything that had unfolded. The world seemed unusually peaceful. The gentle breeze reminded them that life continues moving, even while hearts wrestle with difficult decisions. They closed their eyes. One memory after another returned. The first smile. The first meaningful conversation. The first moment they realized your presence affected them differently than anyone else's. Every memory now carried new meaning. What once felt like coincidence now seemed like pieces of a larger story slowly coming together. Then they asked themselves a question they had avoided for far too long. What kind of future am I creating if I continue choosing fear? The answer arrived almost immediately. A future filled with unanswered questions. A future where honesty remained trapped behind silence. A future they no longer wanted. Something shifted inside them. It wasn't sudden excitement. It was peaceful conviction. They realized courage doesn't remove uncertainty. It simply refuses to let uncertainty make every decision. That realization became the turning point. The next morning, your soulmate began making quiet changes. They started letting go of old doubts. They stopped replaying every imagined worst-case scenario. Instead, they focused on becoming someone who could speak honestly, regardless of the outcome. Every small decision reflected this new mindset. They smiled more freely. They listened more deeply. They appreciated ordinary moments instead of rushing through them. It felt as though their heart had finally stepped out from behind a heavy curtain. People noticed the difference. You seem happier. You seem lighter. What changed? Your soulmate simply smiled. Some transformations are too personal to explain with words. Yet while all of this was happening, something equally meaningful was unfolding elsewhere. Without realizing it, the choices you were making were quietly creating a path that seemed destined to cross theirs again. Neither of you could see the full picture. But each step brought the distance between your stories a little closer. Destiny rarely rushes. Instead, it patiently arranges moments until the timing feels right. Then, when hearts have grown enough to recognize what truly matters, everything begins to align. One evening, your soulmate received an unexpected invitation. It wasn't extraordinary on the surface. It looked like any ordinary gathering. They almost declined. After all, they weren't in the mood for another social event. But something inside gently encouraged them. Go. They couldn't explain why. They simply listened. Looking back, later, they would realize that one simple decision changed everything. Because among the people expected to attend, there was someone carrying information they had never imagined. Someone who had quietly witnessed part of your journey. Someone who knew something that would completely reshape your soulmate's understanding. As the gathering began, conversations flowed naturally. Nothing unusual happened at first. Then, a single unexpected sentence changed the atmosphere. I've been meaning to tell you something about them. Your soulmate immediately looked up. The room suddenly felt smaller. Every sound around them faded into the background. Their heart whispered, "This matters." They had no idea what they were about to hear. Would it bring hope? Would it raise new questions? Would it finally explain why your connection had always felt different from every other relationship they had experienced? They leaned forward. The person took a slow breath. Then quietly began speaking. The very first words were enough to leave your soulmate completely speechless. And what they discovered in that conversation would challenge everything they thought they knew about the journey your two hearts had been taking all along. My beloved child. Your soulmate held their breath. The room that had been filled with cheerful conversations only moments before suddenly seemed to disappear. Every sound faded into the distance. Every distraction lost its importance. There was only one thing that mattered now. The person across from them looked into their eyes and quietly said, "You've only seen one chapter of their story. There is so much about them that you still don't know." Those words settled deep within your soulmate's heart. Not because they created fear, but because they awakened an even greater curiosity. For years, they had believed they understood you. They thought they knew why you smiled the way you did, why certain moments made you unusually quiet, why your kindness seemed effortless even when life became difficult. But now they realized something profound. The strongest people often carry untold stories behind their brightest smiles. The conversation continued. "They've faced moments that would have made many people lose hope," the person explained gently. "Yet instead of becoming bitter, they chose compassion. Instead of closing their heart, they continued encouraging others." Your soulmate felt an overwhelming mixture of admiration and humility. Suddenly, countless memories began making sense. The calmness you carried. The patience you showed. The way you celebrated other people's victories without asking for recognition. None of it had been accidental. It had been shaped by experiences that strengthened your heart rather than hardening it. Your soulmate quietly whispered, "I wish I had understood sooner." The person smiled. "Understanding comes when the heart is ready." That sentence remained with them long after the conversation ended. As they walked outside, the evening sky seemed brighter than usual. The air felt lighter. Not because every question had been answered, but because they had discovered something far more valuable. Love isn't only about being seen. It is also about choosing to truly see someone else. That realization transformed everything. For the first time, your soulmate stopped imagining what they wanted from the future. Instead, they began asking a different question. How can I become someone worthy of protecting a heart like theirs? That single question marked the beginning of an entirely new journey. From that day forward, they became more intentional. They listened more carefully when others spoke. They became more patient with people carrying unseen burdens. They learned that quiet kindness often reveals greater strength than loud confidence. Without realizing it, your influence was already shaping who they were becoming. And perhaps that was the greatest surprise of all. Even in your absence, you continued inspiring growth. Days turned into weeks. The memory of that conversation refused to fade. Instead, it became a quiet source of motivation. Whenever fear whispered, "What if it's too late?" hope answered, "What if this is exactly the right time?" Whenever doubt questioned, "What if nothing changes?" faith quietly replied, "What if everything already has?" Those silent conversations slowly rebuilt your soulmate's confidence. Then something happened that no one expected. One afternoon, someone who had witnessed the public confession approached your soulmate again. This time, their expression carried excitement. "I need to tell you something." Your soulmate immediately sensed this wasn't an ordinary conversation. "What is it?" The person smiled. "After everything that happened that day, people haven't stopped talking." Your soulmate's heart skipped a beat. "They're talking about me?" "Not just about you. They're talking about the courage it took to speak honestly." The words brought unexpected emotion. Your soulmate had never wanted attention. They had only wanted freedom from silence. Yet somehow, their honesty had encouraged others. One person admitted they had finally reconciled with someone important. Another decided to express gratitude they had delayed for years. Someone else found the courage to apologize after carrying regret for far too long. Your soulmate stood speechless. They never imagined one truthful moment could inspire so many others. In that instant, they understood something beautiful. Authenticity has a ripple effect. One honest heart gives another heart permission to be honest too. That evening, as they reflected on everything that had unfolded, they looked toward the horizon and quietly smiled. If speaking my truth could encourage strangers. They paused. Then maybe it's time to fully embrace the path my heart has been leading me toward. For the first time, there was no hesitation in those words. No second guessing. Only quiet confidence. Yet destiny still held one final surprise. While organizing old messages and memories, your soulmate discovered something they had completely forgotten. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't expensive. But it carried extraordinary meaning. It was a small reminder of a conversation you once shared. A few simple words. A thoughtful gesture. A moment that had seemed ordinary at the time. Yet now, looking back with new understanding, they realized that moment had quietly changed their life. They smiled through grateful tears. So that's where it all began. Everything suddenly connected. The admiration. The respect. The affection. The courage. None of it had appeared overnight. Every experience had gently prepared their heart for this season. And now, there was no turning back. They weren't chasing a fantasy. They weren't trying to rewrite the past. They simply wanted to honor what had become undeniably true. But just as they reached that peaceful conclusion, their phone vibrated. A new message appeared. It wasn't from someone they expected. It wasn't about work. It wasn't ordinary. The sender mentioned your name. Only one short sentence appeared on the screen. Yet those few words were powerful enough to make your soulmate's heart race all over again. They stared at the message. Read it once. Then again. Because what it revealed suggested that your paths might be closer to crossing than either of you had ever imagined. And in the very next chapter, one unexpected meeting would force both hearts to decide whether they were finally ready to stop wondering, and start writing a brand new story together. My beloved child. Your soulmate couldn't take their eyes off the message. It wasn't long. It wasn't dramatic. Yet every word seemed to carry a weight far greater than the screen could hold. For a few quiet moments, they simply stared, reading it again and again, searching for hidden meaning. The message didn't answer every question. Instead, it opened a door they had believed was permanently closed. A door leading back to hope. Their heart whispered something they had not allowed themselves to believe for a very long time. What if this is the beginning? That single thought stayed with them for the rest of the day. No matter where they went. No matter who they spoke to. Their mind kept returning to the same possibility. Not because they expected life to become perfect overnight. But because, for the first time in years, the future no longer felt uncertain. It felt possible. That evening, they chose to walk somewhere peaceful. The world around them seemed unusually calm. Children laughed in the distance. The breeze carried the scent of fresh air. The sky slowly transformed into warm shades of gold and blue. Everything around them seemed to reflect the quiet change taking place within. As they walked, they realized something surprising. They were no longer replaying past regrets. Instead, they were imagining future conversations. What would they say if they finally stood before you? Would they begin with an apology? Would they simply smile? Would words even be enough? Every possibility filled them with nervous excitement. Not fear. Hope. For so long, fear had written every chapter of their story. Now hope gently reached for the pen. Meanwhile, people close to your soulmate continued noticing the transformation. You seem different. You've found peace. Something good must be happening. Your soulmate never revealed every detail. Some stories become stronger while they're still unfolding. But one thing was obvious. The heaviness they had carried for so long had begun to disappear. And in its place, purpose quietly emerged. Then came another unexpected moment. Someone who had witnessed the unforgettable confession approached them with a thoughtful expression. "I've been thinking about what happened that day." Your soulmate smiled softly. "So have I." The person continued. "You know what surprised everyone the most? It wasn't that you admitted your feelings. It was the way you spoke with complete sincerity. There wasn't anger. There wasn't pride. There was only gratitude." Those words touched your soulmate deeply. Because they realized something they hadn't noticed before. Real love doesn't demand attention. Real love doesn't seek applause. Real love simply tells the truth. That understanding became another turning point. Instead of worrying about outcomes, they began focusing on becoming the kind of person whose actions reflected the feelings inside their heart. Every day became an opportunity to grow. To become more patient. More compassionate. More courageous. Without realizing it, your influence continued shaping every part of their journey. Then one quiet morning, everything changed again. While organizing plans for the week, an invitation unexpectedly appeared. At first glance, it looked completely ordinary. A simple gathering. Nothing unusual. Nothing extraordinary. But something inside immediately caught their attention. There was a familiar place mentioned. A place connected to a meaningful memory. Their heart began racing. Not because they knew exactly what would happen, but because intuition quietly whispered, "Don't ignore this." For a brief moment, uncertainty returned. What if I'm reading too much into this? What if it's only a coincidence? Then they remembered the promise they had made. No more allowing fear to decide. They accepted the invitation. The days leading up to the gathering felt unusually long. Every morning brought anticipation. Every evening ended with quiet reflection. Sometimes they smiled for no reason. Sometimes they became emotional remembering how far they had come. Not long ago, they couldn't even admit their feelings to themselves. Now they were preparing to step toward whatever the future might hold. That alone felt like victory. The night before the gathering, they barely slept. Not because they were anxious. Because they were hopeful. Hope has a beautiful way of keeping hearts awake. As the sun finally rose, they stood before the mirror for a long moment. Not judging themselves. Not criticizing every flaw. Simply recognizing someone who had changed. Someone stronger. Someone kinder. Someone finally willing to live honestly. They quietly smiled. No matter what happens today, I'm grateful I chose courage. Those words carried extraordinary peace. Then they stepped outside. The journey had begun. With every step forward, memories returned. The public confession. The encouraging conversations. The forgotten keepsake. The unexpected message. Every moment now felt connected, as though invisible threads had been guiding them toward this very day. When they finally arrived, they paused for a deep breath. People gathered nearby. Conversations filled the air. Laughter echoed through the surroundings. Everything appeared completely ordinary. Yet their heart insisted this day would become unforgettable. As they slowly entered, familiar faces greeted them warmly. Everything felt comfortable. Natural. Until, across the room, someone spoke your name. Your soulmate instinctively turned. Their heartbeat grew louder than every surrounding conversation. The crowd shifted slightly. For one breathtaking second, they believed they were about to witness the moment they had imagined countless times. But before they could take another step, someone gently placed a hand on their shoulder. I've been looking for you. Your soulmate turned around. The expression on that person's face was unlike anything they had seen before. There was excitement, relief, and quiet amazement. Without wasting another second, they smiled and said, "You need to hear what happened after everyone left that day, because there's something about this story that nobody has told you yet." Your soulmate stood completely still. Every emotion returned at once. Curiosity. Hope. Wonder. Because whatever they were about to hear had remained hidden until this very moment. And deep inside, they sensed one undeniable truth. The biggest revelation of this entire journey had not happened during the public confession. It had happened afterward. In complete silence. Where only a few people knew the truth. And that hidden truth was finally about to come into the light, leading to a conclusion that would change everything. My beloved child. Your soulmate stood motionless. The words they had just heard echoed through their heart like a melody that had been waiting years to be played. The biggest part of this story happened after everyone left. For a moment, nothing else mattered. The laughter around them faded. The conversations became distant. Even time itself seemed to slow, inviting them to listen with their whole heart. The person beside them smiled gently before continuing. After everyone heard your confession, people didn't walk away laughing. Your soulmate looked up in surprise. They walked away inspired. A wave of emotion rushed through them. The person continued. They kept talking about the courage they witnessed. They said it reminded them that life is too short to leave the most important words unspoken. Some reached out to loved ones they hadn't spoken to in years. Others chose forgiveness instead of resentment. A few even admitted feelings they had hidden for far too long. Your soulmate could hardly believe it. The moment they had feared most had become a source of hope for others. Without realizing it, one act of honesty had created a chain of kindness that continued long after the room had emptied. Then came the words that changed everything. There was one more thing. Your soulmate felt their heartbeat quicken once again. The person you spoke about, your story reached them too. Silence. Complete silence. Every emotion they had carried over this journey suddenly met in one unforgettable moment. Not fear. Not panic. Only quiet wonder. They didn't hear a rumor, the person explained. They heard that someone spoke about them with genuine respect, gratitude, and love. They weren't described as perfect. They were described as someone who changed another person's life simply by being themselves. Your soulmate closed their eyes. A single tear escaped. For the first time, they understood something beautiful. Real love isn't remembered because it's loud. It's remembered because it's sincere. Every chapter of this journey suddenly made sense. The silence. The waiting. The fear. The confession. The conversations that followed. None of it had been wasted. Each moment had prepared their heart to become more honest, more compassionate, and more courageous than it had ever been before. They smiled not because every question had already been answered, but because they finally trusted the path ahead. As they stepped outside, the evening sky stretched endlessly above them. The same stars that had witnessed lonely nights now seemed brighter than ever. The same breeze that once carried uncertainty now carried peace. They whispered softly, "Whatever tomorrow brings, I no longer want fear to tell my story." Those words became a promise. A promise to choose honesty over hesitation. Kindness over pride. Hope over doubt, and love over silence. Because they finally realized that the greatest victories are not measured by applause. They are measured by the courage to remain true to your heart. Perhaps that is the message this story was always meant to share. Not that every ending is predictable. Not that every journey is easy. But that the strongest connections are built through authenticity, patience, and the willingness to speak with sincerity. If someone has ever made your life brighter, don't wait forever to appreciate them. If someone has encouraged your heart to become better, treasure that gift. If life gives you an opportunity to choose kindness, choose it wholeheartedly. This has been a fictional inspirational story created for entertainment, but its message reflects a timeless truth. Honesty, compassion, and hope have the power to transform lives in ways we often don't see until much later. So carry this reminder with you today. Walk with confidence. Speak with kindness. Love with integrity. And never underestimate how one sincere moment can create a ripple that reaches hearts far beyond your own. If this story encouraged you, let me know in the comments which moment touched your heart the most. Your thoughts may inspire someone else who needs hope today. And if you'd like more uplifting stories like this, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next journey. May your heart be filled with peace. May your path be guided by wisdom. May hope meet you in unexpected places. And may every new day remind you that the most beautiful chapters of life are often written one honest choice at a time. God bless you, always.